Hey everyone, welcome to a very, very special edition of Grace at Night. I've got my awesome friend Eric Brisson here with me. I've known Eric for how long? 15 years now, 16 years now, something like that. But we've been
2006.
we've been friends for a while, and he leads a very awesome, interesting, and unconventional lifestyle that I would love to share over this podcast. So welcome everybody, Eric Brisson. Woo! Clapping noises. So the first thing that I want to talk about is some of you guys might have heard me talking about Eric. I talk about him all the time because he's really cool and I hang out with him. But I refer to him as Harry. So I want to share the story of why everyone in Harry's life, including me and including his professional circle, calls him Harry. So Harry, tell us why I actually call you Harry when your real name is Eric.
Oh man, this is such a it's a long story, but I'll tell the short version of it. It has three acts. The first act is that I moved to Singapore and I met a group of friends that became very close to me who thought because I was a Caucasian bespectacled person. I've since had LASIK. They thought that I looked like Harry Potter somewhat, and they thought it would be funny because this was in Singapore and there were fewer bespectacled Caucasians in Singapore. They thought it would be funny to introduce me to the rest of the class as Harry. And I, being a seventh grader at the time, just wanted people to hang out with me and really was not going to get into particulars of nomenclature and so on. And so people just began to know me as Harry in that community in Singapore, where I was for like 4 or 5 years. And then my senior year, Act 2, moved to Katy, Texas, and met a bunch of wonderful folks, including Ben Chai here.
Woo!
And as a part of that, was going to go by Eric, actually, because, again, that's my birth name. That's what my parents call me. It's what telemarketers call me. I was very fortunate that a friend of mine from Singapore also went to Cinco Ranch High School, where both Ben and I went. And when he saw me registering for classes at Cinco Ranch, he was like, "Harry, oh my goodness, hey everybody, this is my friend Harry from Singapore." And so a lot of folks knew me as Harry in Katy as well. And then when I went to college, which is the third act, I had to apply. As we do to colleges in the United States. And in my application, there was a place to list, if you had a nickname. And because I had a teacher write me a letter of recommendation to college that knew me as Harry, I had to make clear, like, I didn't want them to think the letters of recommendation got mixed up in the mail. It's like when this person is saying Harry is a good student, I want them to know, like, I'm Harry because my name is Eric Joseph Brisson and it's confusing otherwise. I noted that my nickname was Harry. And then when I get my acceptance letter, it's congratulations, Harry, on your acceptance to the class of 2011, which was the class that I was in. And then when I got there, it was on my door, it was on my name tags, and it was on my email. And so I was not going to fight it. And so that was another 4 years of being known as Harry. So that was about a decade just through happenstance. But then when I was when I started working at I did media research. I was working at a company. I was on a small team of 5 people, and there were 2 other people named Eric on that team. And so I could choose to be the third Eric, to have there be like a majority of people on that team named Eric. Or, I could have a name that was very familiar to me already. And so I chose to go with Eric at that point. And I was with that company.
You mean Harry? You chose to go with Harry.
Oh, yeah, Harry. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the names sound the same to me. I'm not able to different. I chose Harry, and yeah, the name's really been with me since.
That's awesome. He forgets to mention that he was class president at Denison University. I didn't know that your email was registered as Harry. So it was like, what, H. Brisson?
Brisson _H. Yeah.
No kidding. I wonder who did that.
I think it must just be automatic. I mean, the nickname system too, a lot of times it's designed with international students in mind who really use it as their like primary name. It's very rare that somebody is like noting their nickname to avoid confusion on letters of recommendation. Like, I think people assume that you want your Denison professors, that you want your university professors to refer to you by the same name that your high school teachers did. But yeah, so it's but I don't know. I tell people too, like I picked neither of the names. Folks can call me how they want to call me.
That's awesome. Well, I will probably call you Harry for the rest of our lives. So,
That's
I wanted to address the elephant in the room. Usually, I do this podcast live, but we are on a Zoom call now, clearly. And I think that's a good segue into your life and what you've been doing for the last, 2 years or so. I wanted you on this podcast because I think that you live a very unconventional life, especially for people of Katy, Texas. And but it's so inspiring and it's so like I just love hearing about it. What our audience doesn't know is that every time I call you, which is or text you or whatever, which is like every few weeks or so, I would say, you're in a different country. So right now you're in Chicago, which is here. It's fine. But tell me where you were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I was in I just came back from Indonesia. Well, from Singapore, and before that Indonesia. And then before that, well, basically I had a conference in Prague where I was speaking about popular music globally and how it varies regionally. And then coming back from Prague, I took the long way around where I flew through Doha to Mumbai. I took a train across India from Mumbai to Kolkata. And then from Kolkata, flew to Kuala Lumpur, to Bali, to Singapore, and then back. So all the way around. It's if you get an extra day out of the year, if you can manage to travel, you just keep traveling toward east would be the direction. I was like,
Right.
you're so similar. 3 out of 4 letters are the same, so I have to keep them straight.
That's crazy. And so again, you've been doing this for a while now. What's it like? Like, maybe something I want to talk about is like, what does home mean to you? What's the idea of home for you now? Because you're what I guess the internet would call a digital nomad, in some respects. But you do check in like every time you're back in Katy. I demand that we hang out. So so there's that element of home. But like, what's it like having a constantly moving foundation as far as where you live? How does that affect you? How does it affect you personally, mentally, maybe spiritually? Like, I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah, that's home is something I think a lot about. So growing up, I mentioned that I lived in Singapore for a lot of middle school and high school, and then I moved there. Home was always sort of like a transient thing. I was born in Miami, Florida, but I only lived there for like 6 months, so that's always been like a relatively weak tie. My parents actually have a wonderful hometown of Winnipeg, Manitoba, in central Canada, which is a beautiful place, but I never really lived there myself, nor like we visited a couple times. Most extended family had actually moved further west in Canada, to Vancouver Island and Vancouver City. And so a lot of those are places that kind of felt home-ish, because they were constant in my life growing up. But like we would spend like, I don't know, a couple weeks there a year. When I was very young, lived in the Caribbean, so Kingston, Jamaica, and then Nassau, the Bahamas, which were really wonderful places where, I learned to talk, and I learned a lot of basic concepts about what it is to be a human being and to be alive and so on. And I have some early memories, but, not really places I think of as home. The United States, I've spent a lot of time within the country now. I lived, so we overlapped some when I lived in Los Angeles.
Right.
And I lived and worked in Los Angeles for like 6 years, which is, a city of a lot of transplants. And I spent a lot of time in New York, which is similarly a city of transplants. A lot of people who don't grow up there call it home. So I think I mentioned, all these sort of pieces to say that home is I don't know if I fully understand what the concept of home is. Whenever people have a hometown, I'm always very drawn to that. I'm always like excited to hear about their relationships with it. I love like movies that like homeness and like sort of the resentment that teenagers eventually sort of get with their home is like something that I always find so fascinating, because as much as I romanticize it, like a lot of people don't like not only don't appreciate, I think, having a hometown, but like actively resent having like a home place.
Right.
And part of like you mentioned the digital nomad stuff, the traveling and so on. Part of why I started traveling again after 6 years in Los Angeles was that I just felt like I was getting restless a little bit, and like so maybe that's like how I've like thought about sort of resenting a sense of home. I think that inertia is a very powerful force, and so I thought about travel as like I wanted to have inertia at my back, not on my shoulders. I wanted to have inertia being a thing keeping me in motion, right? The Newtonian concept of like an object at motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest. I didn't want to be an object at rest staying at rest anymore. I wanted to be an object in motion staying in motion. I think it's very powerful. So like it may sound to somebody who's not done a lot of traveling, like I almost feel that doing a lot of traveling in sort of a like getting into the habit of traveling and staying in that habit is just as easy as staying maybe in one place. You just sort of it becomes normalizing, or it becomes normal to you as you get more exposure to it. But so I would love I'd love to, like, I feel like home is still a concept that I think a lot about. Certainly Katy feels like home. I'm very fortunate. So like my folks who live in Katy, and my mom, like they still live in the house that I, spent my senior year of high school in. And I know a lot of friends where their folks, well, first I'm just grateful to have my folks be alive and in my life, but a lot of people's folks like change houses, and so you say goodbye to a room that like you sort of lose any connection to that at all. So I think that's something I have some gratitude for, that like when my parents did decide to sort of stabilize in one location, they did that like right before, like while I could still have a little bit of a foothold, and sort of like have memories that now when I go back and visit them, I feel like I am going to a home of mine, which is very cool. I think that there's just so those are some thoughts on that, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Like when I think of home, I think of like the people I love, and it's much less about maybe a place of residence and more about the community that I have. But you being in a different country every 3 weeks, like how do you have that, or do you just make do without it?
Something that I've really enjoyed. I think I still have a sense of home. Certainly coming back to Katy to see my parents feels like home. But like when we did that like hackathon last
Oh yeah,
Festivus,
we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a bit.
we can talk about that. Like that, that felt that feels like home. I do think there is a sense of we invest in other people. And that's a sense of home. So I was an ad researcher. I did media research, but a lot of it was like sort of advertising, right? And in terms of like why does advertising work? A lot of it works because familiarity is such a powerful psychological force for people, right? And so like if you're looking at a listed your 10 different brands of laundry detergent on a shelf, and there's one that you've seen 100 ads for, right? Like the ads didn't need to even tell you anything at all. You're just going to feel more comfortable with whatever the brand is that you've seen more times. Whether it's worth the additional cost, that's a whole other thing. But I think that that's like a lot of what home is. Home is like familiarity built over time, and sort of it's something that like as humans, right? Like this sort of like just you're not going to get poisoned eating the thing that you've been eating every day for your whole life, or at least like you're much less likely to to do so. So I think a lot of like, why is that so like deeply satisfying? It's like, it's familiarity. And I'm so fortunate to have wonderful people in my life. And I think that's very true. I also think that like in traveling, I would notice places. So like I said, I was in Singapore, like going back to Singapore does feel like home. Singapore's changing fast, but like, where did I go? Did I go and try to like explore new parts of Singapore? Like a little bit, but mostly I was like, oh, this is the movie theater where me and my friends would like go to movies.
Where you saw Harry Potter.
Where I saw, where I saw like all sorts of wild films, and like I noticed new things about it that like now I know it's like Shaw Brothers. Now I'm more from I had a roommate in LA who's a big like Hong Kong movie fan, and so like now I'm familiar with Shaw Brothers as a brand. I never realized and they would like produce like the Hong Kong kung fu movies. So I'm like, wait, that was there the whole time. Like I didn't even realize that. So I can go back and see these things that like have meaning to me and like with new context. So you see new stuff. But yeah, like I think that having like part of what I think I've liked about travel too is even just having focused on now a few places. Like I'm very fortunate where I still will be able to travel some. Like like having places that feel like home that I can go to else at other points in time. So but yeah, like meeting up with friends in a place you've never been before will still feel like home. Going like weddings. I know we've been to a few we've attended some weddings together, including your own.
Yeah.
That's it's like you'll be in a new space, but like there's just something so powerful about about relationships and people. And I'm really grateful that I have folks that I can spend time with in a lot of different spaces.
Yeah. I'll say one of my favorite things to do in life ever is when my worlds collide. So like whenever, so as an example, your mom started coming to Grace Fellowship a couple months ago and you were there with her. I don't remember what day it was. Was it like, I don't remember what day it was, but I just remember like, I've met your mom a couple of times growing up. But that was always like, oh, this is my senior high, school group of friends, and their parents. I always called her Mrs. Brisson or something. And then when I saw her again a couple months ago, after 10 years of not seeing her, and suddenly I'm calling her Suzanne. Like, it's like when worlds collide and like this kind of thing where, I don't know, you can create community in that way where, you have two distinctly different lives almost come together and meld into one. And it's just like, oh man, this feels good. This is really cool. I wanted to so you refer to your work life as what you did. I hope it's okay that I'm bringing this up, but something that's really interesting and fascinating about you is that you're kind of like semi-retired in a way, and that's why you're able to do all this traveling and stuff. And I just think that's that's really awesome. And what I find fascinating about you is when most people, at least in Katy, Texas, think of retirement, it's kind of like, I'm done with work, I'm chilled out, I'm gonna buy a nice house and just live there for the rest of my life. But for you, we are the same age. You have gone the exact opposite direction as far as like what do retired people do, right? And so where do you find that drive? Like, why do you even bother? Because we, in our senior high school group of friends, we have another friend who is semi-retired who's been vacationing in the Caribbean and all over for like the past year. And so why, where do you find the drive and what makes you want to keep doing it?
Oh man. Yeah. Well, and also like, to be clear, I like, it's a certain level of financial independence. I'm not retired. I still do work actually like quite a bit. But I was on a track where I worked at a large company. I felt very lucky to get a good gig there that I really enjoyed. I sort of climbed the ladder up to sort of leading a small group, being a VP, and like it was, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And then it just, I think a couple things. One, I sort of just like always knew I wanted to try to make an impact outside of that. And I think part of just the way my brain works is that it's easier, if I have three things on my plate and one thing is my favorite thing, like I'm gonna eat all the stuff that isn't my favorite thing first. Like, you think there's some people who will like have a little bit of the thing that they like moderately, and then have some of the thing they love, and then have the thing they like, and then have the thing they love. But I like to polish off all the stuff that is like, yeah, fine, perfectly fine, and then save my favorite part for last. And so I thought of that like in terms of my work life. Like, I worked really hard for a decade doing sort of more corporate stuff. But then I was like, yeah, I want to try to figure out sort of another path. And I don't know if I've totally figured all of it out. For the first year of this sort of stuff, I was doing actually quite a bit of consulting-ish projects that were just just freelance data science-ish type work, research, stuff that I thought was still aligned with my values, stuff that, speaking of relationships and home and stuff, like was working with people that I knew from, it was one of my best friend's sisters like needed help with something. I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And, I made money off of that. But yeah, I think that's like a big like piece of it. One was sort of just always knowing that I wanted to try to do more of my own thing, but not like, I know some people who are like, they'll graduate college and become an entrepreneur, and I'm not that way. I feel like I'm like a little more anxious about risk. But yeah, so I sort of just found the right path where I was like, I want to hit certain financial targets for myself, give myself enough runway to do some exploration. And ultimately just have more chapters in my life. I think too is like part of how we experience time, right? Like, because I did all this stuff in like media research, I would read a lot on psychology. Like, a lot of how we experience time is like, if we do a lot of different things, that will feel like more time. Like, when we're processing new information, time slows down, versus if we're doing something, like that home feeling. It's a great feeling, but it also means that you're like, that time will go by very fast, because you're not actually like your brain is sort of like, oh yeah, I know what this is. like
oh, that makes
your brain's already kind of like moving on a little bit, right? And so by finding ways to inject novelty, you can extend at least your experience of life and time. And so, like, I don't know, I felt I was in a routine, and I wanted to shake things up, and found ways definitely to do that with travel. I think that, yeah. And I like, part of it too was I went on a trip. I actually didn't travel for a lot of my time in LA. Like, I really didn't travel at all. And then for my 30th birthday, I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Europe, and I spent a week basically sleeping on a Flixbus, which is like I think now it's in the US too. Like, their sort of mega bus type service. And I paid for no hotels. Just every night I would find like an 8-hour bus to get on to another city, and I would sleep on the bus. And so I like saw a whole bunch of things. And that was like a week. And I was like, there's so much I haven't seen, because I hadn't traveled for a while. And so I was like, I want to have a more complete mental model of like what the world is. Like, it's just such a wild thing. Like, we have I think everybody has a sense of like what the world is and who is on the planet, and what like the balance of those things are. But yeah, I mean, I was just in Indonesia. Like, a lot of people don't realize that's the 4th largest country in the world, right? Like, Bahasa Indonesia, the language, the sort of the lingua franca of sort of the post-colonial territories that became Indonesia, organized. Yeah, oh my gosh, we talk about so much stuff there, but yeah, basically, I think a lot of what motivates me to do this, even when it's like, because it's not always fun. Like, travel is like kind of hard. I don't know if I like even like travel. There's some people who like really like travel. I think there's some people who spend more money traveling, and maybe that's part of why they like it more. But traveling could be quite hard, and like part of why I keep doing it, even though it's hard, is because I think having a clearer picture of what the world is important to me. A lot of folks like the Silicon Valley, California joke is like everyone's like trying to make the world a better place, and it's become like sort of this empty meme. And like making the world a better place is like you have to understand what the better place is, right? Like and folks of faith have generally consistent ideas, although it can still vary quite a bit.
Oh man, right.
Right. Like I think people outside of any group think that it's a lot more cohesive than it is. Folks that are in any group like recognize the complexity. But
I mean, definitely within a group too. Like I think you generally assume that your group would all agree on what that might look like. But even within a group, even within the Christian community, it could look totally different.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yep. And so, if you want to make the world a better place, you want to have a sense of what that better place is. Like, you want to know where you're going, but you also have to kind of understand the world, like on its terms. Like, what is the world? Like, what's it about? What do people like? How do other people think about what the better place is that they want to take the world to? Like stuff like that. And traveling, it's still imperfect. Like where we talk about language stuff a lot because I don't know if everyone knows Ben's academic background in linguistics and computational linguistics and some professional background too. Ben's done a lot of really cool stuff in that space. I am an amateur in sort of like I dabble in languages, but like if you go to a place and you just talk to the people who speak English, like you're going to get a sense of that place. But like you're talking to somebody who has invested so much time in learning English as a language, like that person does not represent the broader perspective, right? And so I think that's always something I try to be really mindful of is like, even with traveling, the picture that I'm getting of the world is, as a former researcher, it's a skewed and biased sample size. There are other folks that chose to learn Russian instead, right? They think different things. There's some people who are like, nah, I'm not even going to learn another language. I'm just going to focus on, building deeper relationships with my family, right? Like they're going to have different attitudes. I'm going to focus on, learning some ancient language of my community. There's just like, travel is so good. It helps, but like to travel and then feel like, the world is it's a fool's errand. It can be misleading, and then you can, if anything, develop a more confident wrong view of the world that can do some damage.
Oh, that's deep. So one, I think so Grace Fellowship Indonesia is one of our adopted countries, right? We have 4 people groups in Indonesia.
Love it.
And well, what's interesting to me is like for you're kind of a get up and go. It's like if I asked you to go to Indonesia tomorrow, you would know exactly how to do it. And I feel like, especially like in the missions movement, right? In the missions movement and in church, there just seems to be so many barriers. Like it takes so long to make things happen. And I'm not necessarily talking about mission work specifically, but I feel the mindset of people in Katy, Texas, or even my own mindset, it's like if I want to do something like travel across the globe to share my faith with someone, or just to meet someone, or be a friend to someone, it's like a really complicated process that might take, that might be complicated enough that it discourages me from doing anything. But for you, it sounds like it's just like, all right, I'll go. Where do you find that? Where do you find that kind of energy first off, but also the know-how? Like, how do you prepare for something like that?
Man, it's a good question, and it is like true that travel was easy, and then it got harder, and now it's like getting easier again, right? Like just thinking about the past 5 years and all the world history we've lived through. I like some of it is just once you do something once, it gets easier. Be okay with it being a little hard. Again, inertia is a powerful force. Now I've been to a few places, and especially going to places that I've been to before is like much easier. Houston, I don't even know, like Houston has directs. Like there are a few places, right, that just like do loads of flights. And so I don't even know which, do you go east or do you go west? I think that's that's probably the big choice. And if you go, like you could probably go through one of the, like I'm thinking like oil countries and things like that. I mean, it's okay. So one thought I have first is just that, like, I mean, I know lots of folks in the Katie community are working in the energy industry, right? And the energy industry is also like thinking about, the earth is just one big rock with sweet nectar inside, and sort of like working all these different folks doing other stuff too, that I hear about in the advertising, that is effective because it builds familiarity and so on, as I said. But like, I think that like the same sort of thinking about stuff applies, and that it's a challenge that it's also okay to be like, hey, I want to do this thing that I don't quite know how to do. Like, let me do some research and figure out how to do it. I will say too, that like the unreached people groups, like Indonesia, getting to Bali is pretty easy. Getting to Jakarta is going to be easy. Indonesia, like there are parts of Indonesia where it's like, yeah, like it's harder to reach there. People say like it's a small world, and I like don't think that's true at all. Like that's like one of my experiences, and just sort of seeing stuff. Like I've traveled a lot and I've seen so little. And a lot of what I see is like major metropolitan areas that have a lot of shared culture and so on, but like are not very reflective of culture, more generally. I haven't seen the Katy, Texases of Indonesia. I've seen maybe kind of like Houston-ish type areas, definitely like New York-ish type areas, or like I don't even know what the like Bali of Hawaii. I even know Hawaii. I know you spend lots of time in Hawaii. But like I think that probably a lot of what drives me towards it is just having a goal, like which for me is like cultivating a better understanding of the world, and trying to help use my experience with media to help people feel more connected. Like It's a Small World, I think, is a good goal, and I think it's one that resonates with me. I just do not think it's the like state of play for in my experience of travel, even in the places that I've seen, which would be the places that are probably more connected than other spots.
And to me, it sounds like you have this courage to do a lot of things that people who think that the world is really small, who might just be comfortable in their comfort zone, like who just kind of want to live there. It takes a certain amount of courage to step out of that. But I feel like it's the same where like love, for example. You have self-love, and then when you get married, your love like kind of doubles maybe. And then like I always thought about like, oh man, when we have kids, I have 2 kids now, but whenever we have kids, I'm gonna have to share my love between my wife and my kid, and then when I have another kid, I'm gonna have to divide it into 3. But like that's totally hasn't been the case. It's just kind of like my capacity for loving has grown with each addition to the family. And I kind of feel like that might be the case with your understanding of the world, and also capacity to take on greater things. It's not so much that like you're taking a small step towards growing whatever courage you might have or whatever ambition you might have. It's just like the whole thing amplifies with every step you take, and it's not going to happen. Like it's not that you have to prepare yourself to the point where you're ready to take that step. It's you take that step and then you're ready for it. Maybe.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. I agree 100%. I think that it's like a there's like an existentialism, trying to think like essence and existence, like existence precedes essence in this. I think like you need to like do the thing, and then like you'll feel the feeling. I think like part of, again, work in advertising, what it sort of taught me was just like the more you're exposed to anything, like it becomes normal. Like first it becomes normal, and then it becomes familiar. And I think that's the like getting from like terrifying to normal, or getting from like anxiety inducing, unfamiliar, like totally new, novel to normal. That's hard. That is a little hard. And I think like acknowledging that that's hard is helps you prepare for it. And I just sort of bite the bullet, but people have different ways of like finding a way to do that. I still will eat at McDonald's in like different places that I go. Some people are total foodies. I'm not a foodie at all. I will eat a lot of the same boring stuff no matter where I am. Like I think everyone sort of picks and chooses what sort of what they want to cultivate as like a thing that's like normal to them, and then where they want to adventure out and expand. I think it's okay to pick some things and like not go totally wild, but and that maybe helps with going from novel to normal. But normal to familiar is so beautiful. Like the fact that you could pick any place on the globe, and just like if you take 3 vacations there over the next 3 years, like that place, you will get there and it will kind of feel like home. And that's so it's so wild that that's possible. But it's but I think very cool as a thing to cultivate. And I think a lot of people pick the same places. And so which is great because it gives us shared experience that we can use to connect with each other more deeply. But like, yeah, you could pick any place. And if you take multiple trips, it will like again, it's the same way the way advertisers get you. Like you can use those forces to enrich your life as well, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, this actually totally connects to like the church world maybe, and your familiarity with the church. Like, I mean, it took me a solid decade maybe before I felt comfortable at Grace Fellowship. I'm totally honest. Like it was the kind of thing where I wanted to become a Christian. I wanted to get to know Jesus. But I didn't know how, and I definitely didn't feel it. It was like, it almost took me just taking that step. It's like, all right, I'm waiting for it to happen kind of. And I mean, it took a while, and that's really cool. Cause I sometimes feel like faith, at least the stories we hear is like, some guy who's struggling with something, and then he hears an inaudible voice, and then all of a sudden everything's away, and like you have this kind of spiritual awakening kind of thing. But I think I think those are maybe few and far between cases, and a lot of spiritual growth might come out of habit or routine almost, as opposed to some inspired moment or a series of inspired moments. Yeah.
Cultivating familiarity with like with Jesus, but just the broader like the works of Christianity with with the Bible, right? Like different books. I know that's something that I've like I still follow because my mom attends. I'll watch sermons remotely and then talk to her about it. But like going through new books, it's like there's some stuff where it's like, okay, this is like so not like, I'm definitely like between novel and normal right now. Like I am just like trying to find my feet in this, and not in the like building sort of familiarity. Like I think everybody, for me, Ecclesiastes is like, I've read that book like a zillion times. It's like that's my comfort food. Like that's like and it's so good, and like I feel like it just gets better every time I read it still. Like it's just like very satisfying to me. But then there will be other stuff where it's like I don't even like, is this in English, right? Yeah, just getting to the point where I like can understand what's happening is a challenge. And then of course like putting it within some framework of like what anything is some real work. So I definitely think it applies there. I mean, thinking about my like just church going, I mean, with the context of people's path to Christianity and to the church, like I think there's just like so much messaging of all different forms. This is sort of what we were talking about even before, like like I think a lot of people outside of Christian, like where do you even draw the boundaries of that as like a group? I'm sure you working in this space like have a better sense for how that would be conceptualized. But like I think that like if you ask different people, especially outside of Christianity, like what is Christianity, like what are the tenets of it, like I don't know how consistent it would be. Like it's very challenging. So I think that's like the other part of it too, which is just like sometimes it's not only that you're not getting like if you aren't able to build a sort of like like if you're being exposed to different stuff that's inconsistent, then that's even like harder. Like that's the opposite of home, right? Like that's noise. Like that's like that'll take so much more time to familiarize yourself with, because it's complicated. It's cognitively taxing. Whereas like if you sort of hear a simple thing over and over again, I deal with a jingle, then you're gonna buy laundry. That's how it works.
Within terms of advertising, why do you think that happens? Why do you think this mixed messaging happens? Because I mean, I if I had to sum it in two sentences, it'd be like, there's so many denominations, and all the churches just want people to go to their own church, and it's like the big idea disappears and all of that. So within the framework of advertising, why does this kind of thing happen when it seems that everyone would want to have the same goal?
Yeah, I don't even think it's and like to some degree it's different voices within the Christian community creating dissonance, but I think a lot of it is also just like dissonance being created. Like I think there are people that in good faith, to use the term in a secular sense, like just have different understandings. I mean, I don't know. There are people who identify as Christian that like I share, I think, probably very little worldview with, and yeah, sometimes those people are very loud, and that's. Yes. But I'm also like, I feel like my idea, like my concept, some of my concepts of Christianity are also fringe. So like, I don't want to like point fingers at other people necessarily too much. I agree, I like to think we agree on the important things, but it's like this. It's like it's hard to build consensus, and like also like I mean we used to have consensus, right? Like I grew up Catholic, right? Like, and that was like a consensus model, and it's like really interesting. Like I think there's a lot of Catholicism that's like still like appealing to me conceptually, right? Because it solves this problem, right? Like it solves the messaging problem. And you read like the letters between Erasmus and Luther, right, where they're sort of like debating this stuff, and like a lot of the critique, like a lot of people died because folks got into religious wars, because like all of a sudden there was not one voice speaking a language nobody understood to everyone. Like it's like it like it and I love Catholicism. I'm not trying to ignite division or anything. Yeah. But like I just think it's very like there are so many folks trying to sell something. Like everybody's trying to sell something, whether you identify as Christian or not. And like I think that's what's hard, is just like, and everyone's kind of trying to sell the same thing, which is like, I don't even know what to put on it as like a word. Like eudaimonia is like the Aristotelian like a flourishing word, like, but I don't even know if that's what, like, is it just like happiness? Is it just like dopamine? Like it's hard to like figure this stuff out. So I think that like I'm glad we live in a world where we can have lots of different ideas. Like I don't know if there's a human being on the planet that totally gets everything right now. But and so I think the debate can be constructive, but it is loud, and the loudness of it is hard, and it makes finding truth and finding our path through life hard. Yeah, I don't know. That's a long answer, and it didn't step on. Yeah,
no, that was great. I love hearing your perspective on stuff, because you have such a varied understanding, and you're able to see things from perspectives because you've thrown yourself in those waters, and it's cool. I want to touch a little bit about our awesome project over this past winter, and just talk about it and see if we haven't really made any progress on it since then, but I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are on the next step. So Harry and I, December, we created we didn't create. Harry programmed while I supervised. But essentially we parsed out every verse in the Bible. So it was 30 some thousand, right? And and sorted them in terms of linguistic complexity. So not necessarily length, but how complex, based on like a
Word
lexical
frequency.
ranking, word frequency, how complex or how long each word was. And we did this in a couple of languages. So like Arabic was one, Chinese was one, Spanish. So that, for example, if you were going, the Bible is the most popular book on the planet. And if you wanted to talk to someone in their language, it's actually a pretty good resource for like linguistic acquisition. So Harry had the idea of ranking the verses from easiest to understand all the way to the most difficult to understand, and just creating this software that would do that would rank all of the verses. So I mean, there are multitudes of application for this kind of thing, but what do you think the next step's going to be for us? And by that, I mean you.
So it's this site, which is really it's not a full application. We've celebrated Festivus together for decades, for a decade and a half.
It's a decade and a half now, and so for those of you guys who don't know what Festivus is, it's a fictional holiday that appeared in an episode of Seinfeld, I don't know, 20 years ago. And we had a friend who's just a fan of Seinfeld. And so growing up on December 23rd, we'd get together and do all the Festivus things. So this is what we did this past Festivus.
This time, trying to honor our broader friend group and memories. And, I'm into ritual type things. I mean, I think next steps for it will be to, I think that complexity, like how people seek out what they want to learn, is not purely a factor of like, show me the easiest, most common words first. I'm actually, I'm getting involved with teaching refugees English here in Chicago as a thing that I'm doing. So, and as a part of that, I'm doing some coursework in like how people learn English, which I think will be similar to how people learn other languages. Focusing on different kinds of vocabulary that maybe is like more useful in certain situations, I think would be helpful. So like, show me, like, if I want to order a coffee at a coffee shop, like give me like, I don't know if that vocabulary is in the Bible, but it might be, like, just at least show me the stuff that's most relevant. And I mean, the other possibility too is like broadening into like so much, like there's so much text that's like in various languages, but I think that just like connecting words to something that is like semantically meaningful, but also like personally meaningful is really useful. And I'm always a big fan of like I do language practice, and I do my language practice on the treadmill. So like I could do multiple things. Like I'm running the app and I'm like walking, up a 12% incline, because that's what TikTok told me is the right way to do it. So I'm like doing two things at once, but like if I can, incorporate an aspect of spiritual reflection too, I think that's useful. So I think helping people find verses that are more directly connected to a language need would be useful. And so that's something I still think about. I've been in part because so part of what I've spent the past 3 months on, and part of why I was in Indonesia, is I've sort of refocused into music specifically, because I think that's I think that missionaries make extensive use of music as a part of teaching English and teaching other languages and things like that. And so like, I'm not certainly stumbling onto anything new, but helping people find music in the language that they're learning is sort of like how I've sort of focused right now. And I would like to then expand it to a broader set of knowledge. But I think for like the first things you learn in a new language, I think music is just like very powerful and useful for those purposes. Probably there are folks out there that have like hymnal databases in different languages and things like that, but music is also harder to translate, whereas like, I mean, of course, Psalms is music and is translated into like basically every language. Well, actually, there are so many languages it's not translated in, but like so many of I don't even know how to phrase it. You know what I'm saying though.
I know what
That,
you're saying. Yeah.
Psalms have been translated in a zillion languages, some better than others, and some preserving sort of sonorous aesthetic qualities better than others. But yeah, like I think that's the challenge, is like finding something that like also has that musical capacity to sort of just like worm your way into your brain and like really just help you repeat and repeat and repeat until the words just feel a part of you. But also have it exist in a broad range of languages so that I can so that I can incorporate it for more things. So I think that's the two sides of it, is like maybe expanding the corpus of content that it's pulling from, but also I think just like targeting it better to users. If you are trying to learn a language, like seriously, if you're trying to learn a language, and this sounds interesting at all, like the first thing I want to work on is the thing that somebody who wants to learn a language using it says that they want to do. I'm very like I was a product guy. I've been a developer. I've done a lot of different things, but like the product perspective is like, customers always want, right, whatever the client wants built first is the thing usually to build first. The only other thing I'll say though is that a lot of this for folks following artificial intelligence and like these large language models, speaking of linguistic stuff, semantic embeddings, like all this kind of stuff that I know Ben knows well. Like I'm very curious how that can play in to this sort of stuff, like especially like translating stuff into new languages and like even just developing higher quality translations in languages where maybe there's only one. Like it's going to be, because a very exciting time for how we technically understand what words are. And I think that can have profound implications for how we, even just like how we understand, there's something like the Bible. Whenever I'm like on Bible Gateway, like I'm always in the like, show me what the Hebrew was. Like, I want to know, like, what is this word? Like, what does this word really mean? Right. Like, and like, I do think that like language adjacent technologies like OpenAI is like going to be, I think, very, very useful for that. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that, Ben? I know I'm throwing it back to you.
Well, I think of the Quran and I think of Arabic and I think of how much, I guess, strongly the language and the scripture are tied together. And, from the Western perspective, we are presented with pretty like virulent views of Islam and of like what the Quran says. I mean, you've heard, and equivalently, there's a lot of stuff like that in the Bible too, right? Especially like Old Testament, King David stuff. Yeah. And I just wonder if a lot of the divisiveness and a lot of maybe the conflict between our two cultures, like if you're someone in Saudi Arabia and you're reading through the Old Testament and you're reading about King David, and that's like your presentation of the Bible. And then from our like Western lens, where we're hearing about terrorism and we're hearing about all this stuff. Like, I wonder if some of that stuff is not really, conceptually correct. I wonder if it's just simply a mistranslation or misunderstanding. Like, I don't really understand what they're trying to say because I don't understand the language, or it's like it's a different connotation or a different semantic ability. So we both speak Chinese. Fun fact about Harry.
You much better than me, to be fair.
But like something that I've always been that's just bugged me in Chinese is there's no word for parent in Chinese. You say mom or dad, but the collective word like parent doesn't exist in Chinese. Like you could say my mom and dad, and I guess that kind of means parent, but there's no separate word. So it's like, that is a concept that exists in my mind because I know English and I was raised here, right? The concept of what is a parent? It is a one of the people who gave birth to you. I guess that's the idea. But in Chinese, that doesn't exist. Like that concept doesn't exist. The word for grandparent doesn't exist, And so like those are concepts that exist, but there's no way to actually express them in that language. And so I wonder if it's stuff like that leads to a lot of the misunderstanding and a lot of the conflict, especially between like the Eastern and Western hemispheres of the world,
Well, language. So something we've talked about before, and I've actually done more research on since we talked about it, was just like, obviously, like one of the most important concepts in the Bible is that of God, right? And God is a Germanic word. Gott is the German.
Clearly, yeah.
Right. And so like that is not, not Latin, which you'll see, depending on the declination, right, will be something like Dieu, like it's like similar to Dios in Spanish, and Dieu in French, which is related to dia, like the day, which is related to the sky and like the sun and like all this sort of stuff. But of course, like, Jesus spoke some Latin, but probably the least of the four languages that he knew some stuff in, right? Like he spoke more Greek, but then Aramaic and Hebrew were like his really what he spent most of his time in.
Right.
And so he was talking, in Hebrew there are a number of different words that they use to refer to God that are all sort of different. But somebody, when they were like spreading Christianity to Germanic speaking places, like use this concept of God, which is like the etymology. I mean, nobody really knows a lot of this stuff, but like of the scrounging around that I've done, it's the same as like the Visigoths, right? The Goths. So it's like sort of this Germanic people who are the barbarians who actually took down Rome, right? And in some ways were enemies of the church. Their sort of sacred beginning was either a person named Goth, or there are etymologies that think it's related to like a river, because there's a verb for pouring that's like goo or something like that. Like there's some like connections there.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool, as like the notion of like a flow, right? If you think of like the concept of Yahweh, he will be that which will be, or like it will be that which will be, is like this concept of like a flow and order. I think that's like very, very deep and heavy. But then we were talking about this some too, because in Indonesian, term Allah is used, which is like, that because that's before Christian missionaries got there. There were a lot of people in Indonesia were already a part of the trade network that Islamic traders were involved in, and so the concept of Allah as like a one true God was like already something there. But Arabic and Aramaic are actually, and Hebrew, there's Semitic languages, and so they're actually closer. So there's a word like Elohim. I'm mispronouncing everything, but like that's at least like kind of closer to Allah. So like maybe like, is Allah actually a better translation than God, was like something I was thinking, because like it's so wild, because the word God, we hear it in all these contexts. Again, familiarity, like things that we like, the name that we put on God is just like such a deep and powerful thing. And it's very interesting to think about the decisions made by missionaries spreading the word of God to these places, and having to think about like, okay, how do I, like, so in Chinese, I think it's Tianju is like, it's the heaven's master, right? Like, which like heaven, like Tiananmen Square, people are familiar with. It's the same Tian. It's like the gate to heaven is like what Tiananmen Square is. But like in Chinese, like theology, like heaven is like a totally different thing. So the master of heaven, like, is like, how do you use a word that is like outside of the understanding of a people group, or do you bring in a new word? And I think that like the fact that frequently in translations we see like there is this work that's done to find a word to build upon in other groups, and I think that's like to understand. I mean, so much of this we just feel, right? We have a sense feeling of it, like there's like a power, like we look inward. But I think understanding the language and thinking through how that language is different, like it almost helps you triangulate sort of a sense of this really challenging fact. Maybe one more etymology. Are you cool with these etymology facts? Because I've been like thinking about this a lot.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. I love this.
So Holy Spirit is one I've been thinking so much about, because like we think about Holy Spirit, that if I were to say holistic breathing, that would like sound very different. If somebody's like, oh, this person's really into holistic breathing, you'd be like, oh, this person is like an Eastern draws from like Eastern, like thinking, like breathing is like it's everywhere, right? But like holy is from the same root as like whole, right? Which is also holistic, is like, it is like, and it feels weird saying some of this stuff because it's just like, no, like those words are different, right? Because I just like the context I hear them, the associations I have are so different, but it's like those are the same word. They point to the same semantic things, though just in different contexts generally. And then spirit is, respiration, inspiration, expiration, right? Like it's breathing, right? Like that's what, like you have breathed holistically, and then you are, so like you are being inspired by the Holy Spirit. Like that's like, I don't know. It's like really, it's just heavy. I think, I don't know. Your mileage may vary on whether that's like useful for you growing in your own faith, your own practices. But I think that like a lot of these boundaries, like when you really look at like just the breadth of language that we use for these things, and sort of like shared history in words, like there's a lot of common ground, which is, I think, really exciting as somebody who tries to think very humanistically about the world and challenges facing us.
Yeah, man, that's wild. And you telling me all that for the first time, I'm thinking like Holy Spirit in many ways, that translation is like a marketing term almost. Like it's definitely used in a way to inspire familiarity. Yeah, that's absolutely wild. Gosh, I wish I had like a million hours that I could interview you, with. But I have one final question that I kind of wrap this up with. So you and I are both turning 35 this year, right?
Within the next year.
Yeah. Are you going to run for president?
No, that's oh man, no. I'm more pro politician than most people. I'm a lover, not a hater. I know I'm like one of those guys that'll be like, actually, here are some good things about that person you don't like. But for myself, I think there are lots of other ways I can get involved with things, and I also, I don't know. What about you? Is this your presidential announcement? Is that why you want to?
Maybe. Who knows? Maybe we should run on the same ticket.
When you announce your presidential campaign, please invite me to be like president. I deeply look forward to it.
Oh man, dude. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on this. I love you. We've been through a lot in the last 15 years. And it's just, oh man, it means a lot that you came onto this podcast. And so
I love you so much, Ben, and cherish your friendship. I'm looking forward to seeing it continue to grow.
Man,
as we continue to maybe not grow as much as we used to, but yeah.
So do you see these grays, man?
That's a sort of growth. Yeah. Right. As we grow in spiritual capacity. Yeah.
Yes, awesome, dude. Well, have fun in Chicago. I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, cool. Thanks everyone for joining us on Grace at Night tonight. We'll see you at the next one. Bye.